What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Braun Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my Deep Dive series, this time looking at mounted combat tactics. And the first thing I have to point out is that this is my second attempt at this video. I put up my first attempt yesterday, and I had to take it down. And the reason why is that I made a very glaring and embarrassing error in that I misrepresented Treantmonk's position, and I just couldn't have that in my library. So I took it down, and we are going to try this again. So I first need to talk about this issue with me misrepresenting Treantmonk. He, in his video, straight up stated his conclusion, and I missed it. I somehow thought he was making the opposite argument throughout his entire video, and then in that little 10 seconds where he said, "So I conclude," the exact opposite of what I thought he was arguing, I must have zoned out during that part. My only defense is that I'm not really a video watcher. I tend to read more, and when you read, you can stop and contemplate stuff. And sometimes when I'm watching a video, I just kind of start thinking about something and zone out for a second, and then I will miss something, and in this case, I missed something really important. So many apologies to Treantmonk for doing that, and I just wanted to clarify our disagreement, because I said in the previous attempt that I 100% agreed with his conclusion, and it turns out I 100% disagree. So the issue that is about whether a rider and a mount share their action economy. And Treantmonk makes the argument that they do mix the action economy such that the rider can choose to move with his mount's movement and then cast a spell, and then the mount can move again so that he closes with an enemy, and then maybe he uses a bonus action, and then the mount can use his disengage and then move again, right? All in the same turn, mixing their action economy. And he makes the claim that this is consistent with Jeremy Crawford tweets and arguments and interviews, and I don't agree. I mean, I agree that that is rules as written. In the player's handbook, it specifically says that the mount can move and act on the turn that it is mounted, and it is definitely the rider's turn where he mounts it. So that does infer that the mount can take its actions during the rider's turn. But that was in the player's handbook, and I think that Jeremy Crawford's clarifications have all pointed towards the rider and the mount having separate sequential turns on the same initiative order. And Treantmonk disagrees. He thinks that Crawford's tweets and arguments are consistent with that player's handbook ruling, and I just don't buy that argument. I have linked the relevant Sage Advice exchange in the description. I've also linked a forum discussion where I was trying to tease this out and get other people's opinions, so you can check that out and see what other people have to say. But to me, what is critical to understand is that in that exchange, Crawford also answers a question about whether the mount or the rider go first. And he says that you have to choose which one goes first, and then you can't change it without a house rule. And to me, that indicates that he doesn't think of the rider and the mount mixing their actions. Because if they did, the correct answer would be, it doesn't matter because the rider chooses from round to round. But he doesn't say that. He says that you have to choose which one, and it's important which one, and you can only change it from round to round if you house rule it. So that's not a knockdown, drag out argument by any means. That is how I interpret the context of what he's saying. So whether Treantmonk is right or wrong, I don't know, but I don't agree. I do agree that it is way better to play that way. I would totally run it that way as a DM. I would totally want to play it that way as a player, because it's just so clunky to not share turns, and it's so much cooler to actually be able to share turns, and then to have a mount actually be something useful. God forbid. I mean, that's fine by me. So I just wanted to talk about that first before I actually got into the analysis, because if I talked about it in the middle, then it would be just like this huge distraction or whatever. So For the record, Treantmonk says you can mix the action economy. I say you can't. We have a disagreement on whether Jeremy Crawford supports his or my interpretation. So you guys are just going to have to be the judge. But I would urge you to get your DM to do it the way Treantmonk wants. That is way better. So, okay, moving on to the actual tactical content. There are first two things that you need to figure out with your DM when it comes to this mounted combat thing. The first is, where is the rider placed on the mount? And two is, how do the rider and the mount share their action economy? In regards to the first, there's like three ways you can do it. One is the way that you're supposed to do it, as per the rules as written, which is to choose a square within the mount space, and that represents the rider. That is definitely the most advantageous way for the player, but the DM might also choose, for sake of simplicity, to go with the second or third way. Second way being the rider's always at the middle, even if that's the intersection of squares. And three, the blob method, where the rider just basically assumes the dimensions of the mount. So it's definitely better for the player to choose their position, because that allows them some certain offensive options and it gives them better defensive options. So in terms of offense, that allows you to take advantage of the lance, because the lance is a weapon that is really good when it's at 10 feet away, but once you attack from 5 feet away, you're attacking at disadvantage. That's annoying, but if you are controlling your placement on a mount, since it has to be larger than you, so at least a large mount, you can always get that 5-foot buffer by placing yourself at the right spot and attack any enemies that are adjacent to your mount at the 10-foot range. So that is fantastic. I think it's got great elegance because, lances are the classic weapon associated with mounted combat. So it's pretty cool to be able to use mounts in a way that makes lances effective. It also confers some options when you're talking about a huge mount, because remember that a large mount is only 4 squares. So if you occupy one of those squares, that will block off 3 of the 8 squares from which you can be attacked, but not all of them. So you can still be attacked on a large mount. But if you're on a huge mount, all of a sudden you are on a 9-square mount and you can ride in the middle where nothing can actually surround you. And that can be pretty cool. You can just be using a reach weapon and poking at any enemies adjacent to your mount, but they can't hit you at all without a reach weapon because you're in the middle. So if your mount is really durable, and I'm going to presume if it's huge that it's got a lot of hit points, that can be fantastic. For example, the elephant, which is literally listed in the player's handbook as a common mount, can be barded for AC 18 and has 76 hit points. So if you are in the middle of that elephant and your enemies have no choice but to try and attack that elephant first to get to you, that can be super awesome. But if you can choose the placement, you might also want to put yourself at the edge within reach of the enemies because of the mounted combatant feat, right? If you have mounted combatant, you can redirect enemies' attacks that are towards your mount, towards yourself. So you're going to want to still be within range of those attacks so that you can do that, because I'm going to presume that you have some sort of combo going where that's an advantage for you. Maybe you've got like a really high AC and you've got shield available and you're being attacked at disadvantage because you have blur going, or because you have blind fighting and you're in obscurement, or because you have them poisoned or frightened or whatever. If it's an advantage to you to redirect those attacks to you, you're going to want to change your placement on the mount so that you can do that. If you use the blob method, you can still do that. But you can't use any of those cool, reach things that you can do otherwise with the lance. And if your DM chooses to just always place you in the middle, then you wouldn't actually be able to use mounted combatant effectively if you are on a huge mount. So obviously all of these, things are going to matter when you're constructing your character. So you've got to figure it out with your DM. How does this work? Do I choose my placement on the mount? Am I always in the middle, or are we a blob? In regards to the second issue, the action economy of the rider and the mount, this is, again, where Treantmonk and I disagree. So, choose what you like. But if we go by Treantmonk's version, then there are no penalties to strikers, right? If you do it the way that I think that Jeremy Crawford intends, where there are separate sequential turns, then it doesn't really work well with striking. Because with striking, you kind of want to close and attack and then use a disengage of some kind and then get more distance, right? So move, attack, move all in the same round. And you can't do that with sequential turns. You can still use it to some degree because you can close and then get off your mount and then strike and use those striking tactics. And then that would leave the mount on the field as an ally. And, mounts can be really good. Even warhorses have pretty impressive attacks and stuff if they're uncontrolled. Although that does bring up the issue of is it a war-trained mount? Maybe it spooks and runs away and, all of that. And you could ready your actions, so if it's just one attack, you could maybe ready a booming blade and then, execute it during the mount's move, but that doesn't work too well with extra attacks and stuff. So in any case, it's way better if you share and mix that action economy. And so if that's the case, strikers really benefit because you can get 60-foot move on a warhorse, you get a 100-foot move on a phantom steed. And if you can share your actions, then strikers are going to be amazing. Just think about being on a phantom steed with move 100. You could start 50 feet away and close and, get off your attacks, and then the mount can disengage, and then you're 50 feet away again at the end of your turn. And so this guy is he's 50 feet away. He has to dash to even get to you. He might have, be booming bladed and take all this damage if he moves. And you could just do it again. He's completely fucked. So yeah, strikers are amazing under this ruling. And there are also really great advantages to both casters and ranged attackers and to frontline guys. So if you're a caster or ranged attacker, it's pretty obviously awesome to be on a mount. You can choose the range and you're always going to be too far away for them to close in one round. And then you're just casting and attacking with impunity. And when you are a frontline player, there is an awesome benefit to mounts into being able to close the range with the BBEG. Because if we think about how a lot of combats are structured, it's a main BEBEG that's maybe a caster or got special powers who's surrounded by minions. And if you don't have elite movement, you kind of have to fight your way through the minions. And in the meantime, the BBEG is casting on you and doing lots of bad stuff. But if you have a mount, you can circumvent the line. One, the rules in 5e are really, it makes it very easy to penetrate lines. You can move within a creature's reach without incurring an opportunity attack. And then when you're bursting past them, you can use the mount's disengage to circumvent those opportunity attacks. And if they're too close together for you to go through, don't forget that your mount can jump and, typically, get that, jump over creatures and then have to disengage from them. And that allows you to close with the BBEG. And that's fantastic because he doesn't have time to cast. You are disrupting his concentration. You can Nova on him and kill him quickly if things go right. So yeah, huge tactical advantage to the frontline player. And remember, for the frontline player and for the caster and ranged attacker, it doesn't really matter so much what the ruling is as far as sharing the action economy. It's really for strikers where that matters. Because even if it's separate sequential turns, the frontline player and the backline ranged attacker and caster are all good. They can use these sequential turns and still do what they want and gain that advantage. Strikers, it's more problematic. But again, definitely, I think it should be run the way Treantmonk wants it to be run. And that would make it really elite for strikers as well. Don't forget that you can buff your mounts. It's best with you have a paladin and then they share the spells, but you can just straight up buff them. I really like Sanctuary a lot because that's a bonus action, no concentration cast that has end conditions that a controlled mount can't trigger. So it's just always going to, be protected by Sanctuary. And that's a pretty good use of a spell, I think. But you can also, make them invisible, give them flying, haste them. You can straight up, buff those mounts, and that can be good. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what to do if you are facing mounted attackers. Because anything that players can do, the DM can do. And as fun as these tactics are when you're employing them against your enemies, it kind of sucks when they are using them against you. So try and kill the mounts if they are being used to the advantage, but I don't think you need to go there right away. I'm a big believer in taking the first round of casting a defensive spell and just kind of assessing the situation. I'm a defensive-oriented player, and that's how I like to play. And honestly, I've just seen so many situations go sideways, after the "I attack on round one" option. But I think that you can take that time to assess, and if they're using their horses or their mounts in a way that doesn't grant them a massive tactical advantage, you should just do what you always do and, kill those guys without worrying about going through an additional layer of bodies and hit points. But if they are using them effectively, and God forbid, if they have mounted combatant, then you are, going to have to either kill the mounts or try and separate the mounts from the riders with forced movement. So killing the mounts should be easy. If they don't have mounted combatant, you can just blast them with damage. They might be huge, though. Like, again, an elephant might be problematic to chew through 76 hit points. But generally, killing them is not a big deal. If they do have mounted combatant, you are probably going to have to resort to non-dexterity saving throw attacks. So a range of cantrips like Mind Sliver or Toll the Dead can be used, or you can hit them with like Hypnotic Pattern or whatever. But if your enemy has mounted combatant, that's annoying for sure. But if they don't, then it's easy to kill the mounts, unless they have tons of hit points and great defenses, in which case you might want to use forced movement. You can use things like Crusher, like Telekinetic, like Repelling Blast. Like, there's all these different ways to create push mechanics in this game. And if you do those on the mount, that will force the rider to make a dex check if he's not in a military saddle to be dismounted, or you can do it on the rider himself and try and push him off of the mount. You can try to prone the mount, maybe with like a sapping sting or something, and that might make the rider go prone as well. So you've got some options, but yeah, remember how great these mounts are. You have lines, and you don't want them to penetrate your lines and attack your casters and stuff right away. You don't want all of those great ways that mounts can be used to be used against you. So yeah, kill those mounts or separate them from the riders if they are gaining a massive tactical advantage. But that said, you should be on mounts. I mean, I only have a limited playing experience, but it seems to me that most parties don't use mounts all that much. I would recommend otherwise. I mean, my character, Billborn Bafflestone, lives on a phantom steed, and it's super awesome because I'm just so fast and can get to wherever I want at the beginning of the battle, and I always do it so to my advantage. So you should too, man. Mounts are awesome. So I think that's pretty much everything. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Billborn Bafflestone. See you next time.